to do first, I'm Jane Kelly, I'm the neighborhood coordinator, and I live in Flolo, which is neither Lolo or Florence, so I call it Flolo. So what we're going to do is we're going to go around the room and we're going to introduce ourselves very briefly. Say your name and what neighborhood council you're with, and we're going to start with Gwen and Heather, City Council members, Ward 3.
All right.
Go ahead. I'm Heather Harp, and I'm your councilwoman in 3 different neighborhood councils: Rose Park, University District, and Riverfront.
I'm Gwen Jones, and I'm also Ward 3 City Councilor, so the same neighborhoods.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you.
My name is Brett Rosenberg, and I live in Rattlesnake, so someone can claim me.
Upper or lower?
Upper.
Upper.
Alex Gregario, I live in Ward 5, Miller Creek.
Okay.
Jared Keene, Ward 2, Grant Creek.
Welcome.
Brandy Soulars, Lower Rattlesnake.
Okay, thank you.
Elena Hardy, Lewis and Clark, Ward 4.
Okay.
I'm Danny Tenenbaum, and I am in the Low Rattlesnake.
I'm Megan Robinson, and I really like this F2F. So Franklin.
I'm Tim DeFors, and I'm in the River Road neighborhood.
Okay.
Blaine Carey, I'm in the north side, west side.
Bryce Rowe, University District.
Zachary Williams, Heart of Missoula.
Andy Armstrong, Riverfront.
Nick Jones, River Road.
Casey Erickson, Rose Park.
Carol Nieper, Mullen Road.
Nancy DeCastino, Upper Rattlesnake.
Jeff Burkbeek, University District.
Kylie Gelderman, Historic West Side.
Now, Mullen Road is probably Captain John Mullen.
Got no idea, so I'm in the right place, I think.
Okay. There's a map inside your folder, so.
Hi, I'm Meg Witcher. I'm from north side, west side.
Larry Crown, Triangle.
Caitlin McCafferty, Heart of Missoula.
Christine Liddick, Riverfront.
Toffer Lenhair, Franklin to the Fort.
Ricky Ballou, Rose Park.
Kristen Solberg, South 39.
Sierra Farmer. I'm in the Good Hood, which is north side, west side.
Colleen Baldwin, we don't have a neighborhood council, we've just been annexed.
Yes, you are in Grant Creek.
Okay.
Chris Kushel, Far Views, Patty Canyon.
Cindy Sandow, Miller Creek.
Shane Stack, Franklin to the Fort.
Jessica Allred, Lewis and Clark. Aaron Muzo, Grant Creek.
Your turn.
Sarah Ferguson, Franklin to Fort.
Okay, thank you everybody and welcome. As you can see, we really made an effort to get people from all over the city. So there's people, I think, from every neighborhood here. So I think that's fabulous. So anyway, I'm going to just tell you a little bit about how this got started. This was a dream of mine to do this for a number of years, but I never had enough staff. But I did work on it, and I worked with some people in Dubuque, Iowa, who had done it, and in LA. So I kind of had it sitting there, but I never had proper staffing to be able to pull it off. And Heather Harp came and said to Marty Rabine, city clerk, you know, I'd like to put on a Citizens Academy. And she said, talk to Jane. So here we are. So it's been sponsored by the Office of Neighborhoods and Community Forum. Community Forum used their budget for this. And Heather and Gwen have been great in helping with this, and they're going to be at all the academies, and we really appreciate their help. And of course, my assistant, Karen Guestvoda from the Office of Neighborhoods, has been wonderful working on this too. Thank you. And we have a work study student, Morley Merchant, but she's not here today. But anyway, it's been quite a collaborative effort, and it's been quite challenging to choose 35 out of 100, because there were 100 applicants, so that we were a little surprised by that. This is the first time that we've done this. So let's see. The restrooms are down that way. You really have to hike for the ladies' room. The men's room is a lot closer.
I'm going to give an update real quick. The women's and men's room, or the bathrooms that way, are much better.
That's true. The newer ones are by the front door.
By the conference.
So anyway, we have snacks over here. We're going to have snacks throughout the 8 weeks, and on the last day we're going to start an hour early, and we're going to have a pulled pork dinner for you, so, and graduation. So make sure that you come and sign in every time. We don't want any absences. So we're going to ask you not to bring home your binders, just to leave it here and we'll hold on to them for you. And as we get new information, we will add it into the binders. I'm sorry, a couple of things fell out, so, maybe we'll use paper clips or something, but some of the stuff that's not 3-hole punch is a little slippery in there. So we understand that unforeseeable things come up sometimes, so please contact us and let us know if you're going to be absent, because we've had such demand for this that we have a waiting list. And so a couple of ground rules. During any presentations, please feel free to ask questions along the way, but we do ask that you be recognized before speaking. Make concise statements and engage in active listening, and be respectful. Any questions so far? Yes, Larry?
I would like to have people speak up when they ask their question. Don't ask it to the person up there. Ask it to the room.
Okay, that's a great idea. And you can have me repeat it if I'll do that too, if maybe not everybody hears it. So we're going to start with my little PowerPoint now. And I'm going to tell you about neighborhood councils. I'm loud enough for everyone, aren't I? Okay. So this is our logo for the Office of Neighborhoods, and that's me, Jane Kelly, and that's Karen. Okay, I think I'm going to stand over here and talk from here so I don't face the screen. Okay, in 1972, Montana had a constitutional convention. It was called the CONCON, Constitutional Convention. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, but in your binders, there's a really excellent article that came from the Missoula Current that gives you a little more depth about it. It's behind the Constitution. So there were 100 delegates elected, and they came from all kinds of varied backgrounds. 24 lawyers, 19 farmers, 14 educators, 11 housewives, 5 ministers, an FBI agent, and a beekeeper, and I do know there was a graduate student also. And there were 19 women. Now, if you remember 1972, 19 women in a constitutional convention, something like this, is pretty amazing. So it was the most to ever sit in a state constitution, and they were ages 24 to 73. So here are the women of the Constitution. They all got together and had a little picture taken. I think that's really cool. So the themes of the convention were to improve education, protect the environment, guarantee equal rights to all, ensure a strong, responsive government, and guarantee the public's right to know and be involved in government. Here we are. Extend home rule, which is increased self-government for the cities and counties. So the way that they wanted to increase self-rule is that every 10 years on the cities and towns and on the county's primary, there's a question: do you want to study your local government? And if the answer is no, nothing happens. But if the answer is yes, then in the fall, people run to be on the local government study commission to study government. And this happened back in 1994. The answer was yes. So they looked at Seattle. They went to the local government center down in Bozeman. They studied cities all over the country. And they came up with a charter. And let me show you the charter. Here's the charter. The charter basically gave Missoula self-governing powers. And if you look on page 9, it'll tell you about neighborhood councils. So self-governing powers. The other thing was the elections became nonpartisan. So nobody ran as Democrat or Republican or Independent. Elections became nonpartisan, and neighborhood councils became part of city government. So the voters approved this in 1996. So this is very grassroots. This really came from the bottom up. And so, let's see, go to the next one. Let's see what's on that. So it says the city of Missoula values the contribution neighborhoods can make to the governance of the city. Therefore, it's the purpose to strengthen neighborhood participation where it exists and to encourage and support neighborhood participation where it does not yet exist. And so the neighborhood councils were established, and they build cooperation and improve communication between citizens and city officials, and they also work on advising the mayor and city council. So you are a voice, you have a voice. So the city is divided into, that's the city, it's divided into 20 neighborhood councils. And we have somebody, I think, from just about everyone here. So the 20 neighborhood councils, you can go to the next one now, each has a leadership team of 5 to 7 members who are elected. So you're a volunteer, but you are an elected member, so of government. And we have a few in here. Here's one right here. So they're required to have a general meeting, which is, everybody has seen the postcards come out. Yes, that's for a general meeting once a year. You will be seeing the postcards coming out. Hi, Peter. Welcome. So anyway, they meet yearly, but the leadership teams meet as needed. Some can meet once a month. Sometimes they meet quarterly. Sometimes they say, well, we need to have, there's an issue, let's meet. So it's really up to all the neighborhood councils. They kind of all do their own thing. And Karen and I work to make it happen and to help everybody with the meetings. So each neighborhood has a budget of $800, and there's also a mailing supplement, and that's how you get the postcards. So because the leadership team are elected officials, they are subject to the open meeting and public participation laws, just like city council and the mayor and everybody. So this is what they wanted to do with the CON was to make things more open, and this is part of it. Our government is really open. And so anyway, the Constitution is in your handout, in your binder, if you looked at it. And what's really amazing is at the end of the day, all 100 people signed it. I mean, maybe they all didn't want to, but they showed unity and signed it. So that was really excellent. Okay, so neighborhood council, strengthen neighborhood participation, advise city council and the mayor, provide a structure for increased participation, builds cooperation, and improves communications. Any questions along the way? Okay. Now, community forum, once a month, this is really cool. Once a month, there is one person from every neighborhood who is chosen who goes to a meeting on the 4th Thursday of the month called Community Forum. And here there are presentations, a lot of times from city officials or the Department of Transportation, and it teaches citizens what's going on in the city so they can better participate and understand what's going on. And so they also, they go around at the end of the meeting. We have a round table, and everybody says something about their neighborhood that's happening in their neighborhood. So it's a great way to network and meet people from all over the city you'd never get to meet otherwise. So the community forum makes recommendations on citywide issues, and neighborhood councils and community forum and the city shall work together in partnership, bridging the gap between citizens and government. Okay, the Office of Neighborhoods, that's Karen and I, and our work study student. We do things like, we get $20,000 a year, City Council, thank you Heather and Gwen, they approve $20,000 every year for grants. So we solicit grants in the fall, usually October is the deadline, and the grants, the large grants are for $3,000 each. And then we have $2,000 we set aside for small grants that are applied for on a continuous basis. It's a little easier to get a small grant than a large grant. So, and I put on a training workshop for that. And you'll see some more pictures later on. We also have the Outstanding Neighborhood Volunteer of the year. This is the 15th year. Giles Thielen received the award last year, as did the Grant Creeks Trails Association. We have a group and an individual. So what we do is we have the mayor read a proclamation, and the proclamation says, okay, April 15th, no, that's a bad day. April 12th is Giles Thielen Day. And so he gets a day named in his honor. And not only that, he gets a tree planted in a park. And it's really nice. The family comes, friends come, and they speak about him at City Council. And this person is chosen by the community forum. So there's a committee, and then it's approved by community forum. So every other year, at the end of odd years, the Office of Neighborhood sponsors candidate forums for City Council candidates. So you may have seen it. It's coming up again. You probably saw it a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago in the fall. We have all the candidates come, and we usually do it 3 sessions, and we'll bring the mayor if he's running too, and we do it fair and balanced, and we ask questions, and we usually have the League of Women Voters come in, and they can run it so nobody gets out of hand and nasty or anything like that. We try to be very nice and ask good smart questions and not to be offensive to anyone. And this is brand new, the Local Government Citizens Academy, and we're hoping to do this at the beginning of even years, like right now, January, and every other year, so it's brand new. And it's kind of like on the opposite year, there's also the police department puts on a CLIA, a Citizens Law Enforcement Academy. So they'll have one next year, and that's really good to go to also. You learn all about the police department, which is like unbelievable what they have to go through and things that they do. And then you get to go on a ride along. Ooh, that is really something. 2 o'clock in the morning down at the bars, you know? Yeah, it's quite amazing. So some other things that the Office of Neighborhoods sponsors and does with Community Forum. We have a bus tour, and I have pictures of this later. So I get a 55-seat beach liner, and the citizens, we divide the city into 3. And the residents in the neighborhood we're going to visit, they say where they want to go, and they get up and they tell stories about things in their neighborhood. And then the next year we'll go to another 3 neighborhoods or so, and then the next year we'll go to the southern part. And so MCAT comes along and films that too. MCAT is filming right now. Thank you, Mary. And the bus tour, everybody loves it. It really is a lot of fun because, you know, if you live in Miller Creek, do you ever get to the Upper Rattlesnake and vice versa? You know, you get to see all kinds of different places and get to network with the people on the bus, and we'll give you a free lunch too. So it's really a lot of fun. Make sure if you've never come to try to come to that. Leadership team training, if you sign up to be on the leadership team, or even if you have an interest in it, I give a training as needed, usually every couple of months. It lasts maybe an hour and a half. And you'll learn all the nuts and bolts about being on the leadership team. And I always let you know the Office of Neighborhoods is neutral. We don't take sides on anything. And we will absolutely bend over backwards to help you and see you succeed, because that's really our purpose. We send out a weekly digest. Does everybody get the digest? Okay, if you don't, you will, because we have your email address now. So anyway, that's the news of the city, all in bullets, and that's pretty good. And then traffic circles, there was nobody really taking care of the traffic circles, and I raised my hand, so that's how I got that project. It's mostly in the university, some in Riverfront and Southgate Triangle. But I have little grants that I give to people, and I encourage people to take care of their traffic circle, to water it, to plant it, to weed it. And if you look around, you'll see some beautiful ones. We have 44. We started with none adopted, and now we've got, I think, 38 adopted. And some are not adopted, but people still take care of them anyway. So, and if you do that, I give you a free hose, 100-foot hose. So. Okay, so here's a picture of the bus tour. There's the beach liner, the bus that we use. And here's everybody in the bus. Now I have to point this out. You see this person here? That's Heather Hart. It's just so funny. I had to laugh at that. Okay. So we do tabling events also. So what that is we go out and educate people on neighborhood councils and give them free cookies and like bags and chapstick and stuff like that. And we usually have a bubble machine and jump ropes and just make it a fun event. So this is at Sunday Streets. Everybody knows Sunday Streets? Mm-hmm. Okay, and then Stories and Stones. Everybody knows what that is?
I don't.
Okay, Stories and Stones. They use historical interpreters at the cemetery on the third weekend in September. And you can go around from one to another and learn about the dead people that are buried there, because they have people who pretend that they're that person. And it's really, really great and interesting. If you haven't gone, you really should go. And it doesn't cost anything. So, and this is a little secret. This is how we get so many of our email addresses. Our digest goes out to like 6,000 people. So through the years, we keep collecting email addresses at these events. And then we have Earth Day at Mud, which was the best it's ever been last year, and the weather was good for a change the past 2 years. And so that's a lot of fun too. You get to meet a lot of people.
What is MUD?
MUD, Missoula Urban Demonstration Project. And it's over next to Home Resource, like on Wyoming over there.
Yeah.
They have a tool library. So if you want a tool, you can go in and rent a tool. Some tools don't even cost anything. So they do a lot of stuff in the community. Okay, so now the neighborhood project funds, those are the grants. These are the large grants. And some of the grants, people are just amazing what they can come up with. We have community garden solar dehydrators. These are big solar dehydrators like this that are designed where you can do tray after tray after tray of food. If somebody has a lot of food, you can dehydrate it and store it for the winter. Who's seeing all the traffic signal artwork around? Yes, a lot of that is sponsored by the grants from the Office of Neighborhoods. And also the Play at Missoula Piano Project, the pretty pianos that are painted that are around. Expanding the neighborhood toolbox at Free Cycles. Free Cycles is where you can go and build your own bicycle. It's on First Street. And we gave them some extra tables. Well, we gave them the funding to get some extra tables where people can work on their bikes. There's been playgrounds, Bellevue Park has gotten a snake ladder for the kids to ride their BMX bikes over. We've gotten, in playgrounds, we've helped get playground equipment. It's very expensive, so it's been a partnership. There's pocket parks around. We funded trees. The art park has a water bottle filling station. There's some murals around. There's lots of trails we've done. Some are being funded right now. It's going to be over in Bancroft Ponds. They're going to be ADA acceptable. And improved amenities for bus drivers. And we also have partnered with community gardens around the city. And there's a traffic circle. Isn't that beautiful? That's, I think, on 4th and Myrtle. That is really gorgeous. That's one of the prettiest ones. Okay, so what are some added benefits of neighborhood councils? Citizens work together on neighborhood issues and projects, and you get to know each other. And you can impact change in your neighborhood. There's exposure to diverse views and expertise. Citizens learn leadership, increasing volunteerism. There's an increased awareness of the community and government. That's what we're doing here today. And many have gone on to be elected officials. Do we have any in here? Right there, Gwen Jones. She started on the neighborhood council. So, and that's all I have. Anybody have questions about anything? Go to your neighborhood council meetings when you get your postcards and consider running for office. Yes, Gwen?
I was just going to say, it is always fascinating to me how each neighborhood has its own culture and its own personality, and it's incredibly diverse across the city. I mean, I've gone to different neighborhood council meetings and completely different. Let me Speak louder so I can.
I was just saying, it is always fascinating to me how each neighborhood has a different identity and culture, and the neighborhood councils are extremely different, very diverse across the entire city, and it's really fascinating. And we have a lot of personality in this town.
We actually have the Heart of Missoula. They asked me a question, and I was like, I didn't think of that. They said, are we the only neighborhood council that are all female? And I looked, and it was yes. And they're a wild bunch. They're a lot of fun. So, anybody have anything else to add? No? Okay. Yes?
Say that the leadership meetings themselves are also open to?
Yes, it's
not
all
just
open to the public.
Okay.
Yep. And if you get the digest, we send out notices of your neighborhood council specifically what meetings there are. So you can attend a leadership team meeting and come and introduce yourself and see what everybody's talking about. And what's your neighborhood?
I'm Upper Rattlesnake.
Upper Rattlesnake. There's a meeting on the 17th.
I know it's coming up. I get your email.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Okay, now. And I'm sorry, I probably should introduce Mark Thane, Superintendent of Missoula County Public Schools. It's his turn.
Hello. While I set up my technology, I would actually like to do a little survey. First of all, how many of you have lived in Missoula 5 years or less? A few. So new people getting engaged in the community. Perfect. How about how many of you 5 to 10 years? Good. 10 to 15? 15 to 20. Okay, who's got more than 25 years? Excellent. Okay, well, it's good to know the audience. As Jane said, I'm Mark Thane, and I have the pleasure of serving as Superintendent of Missoula County Public Schools. I'm going to quickly swap technology here. Let's see if we get our signal back. Perfect. So my intent tonight is to help develop some background with regard to Missoula County Public Schools. As Jane said in her introduction, I would love questions. So as I'm going through the presentation, please don't be shy at all about getting my attention, and we'll deal with those questions. At some point, we'll take a break when it feels logical, and we're going to take a little tour of what's happening here at Hellgate High School. And I'll get into our facility projects and the bond work in just a few minutes. And then just deal with a little trivia about Missoula County Public Schools. So first, my history. I'm actually an alum of Hellgate High School, Missoula native. Haven't strayed far from home. My office is about 4 blocks from my grandparents' house and about 6 blocks from the house I grew up in. So been in Missoula all my life. I started working in the school district in 1980-81. So this is year 39 for me. And I'm actually going to retire June 30th, so changes on the horizon, which will be interesting to see. I don't know exactly what that means yet for me. I am going to use a PowerPoint just to keep the conversation moving, but again, I would appreciate questions as we move forward. One of the things Jane mentioned was the Constitutional Convention from 1972. And one of the elements we'll talk about today is really important in terms of the Constitutional Convention. Montana's Constitution is unique in the country in that those who are at the Constitutional Convention developed a clause that says we in the state of Montana guarantee equity to the opportunity for education. And that's come to play historically with regard to how school districts have developed, how they've worked, and how they've been funded. And we're going to talk a little bit about our budgets and what drives us in a minute. Missoula County Public Schools technically is 2 different school districts. When I started working in the district, we actually were 2 complete separate entities, 2 different school boards, 2 different superintendents. We didn't intermingle very much. We had a K-8 district and a 9-12 district. In 1992, we unified so that we have a single administration, but in the eyes of the state, we're still 2 separate school boards. So we have a K-8 school district that's comprised of 9 elementary schools, K-5 schools, and 3 middle schools. And it serves basically the city proper. Most come from within the city limits. There are some from just outside the city limits. In addition to that, there are 9 independent K-8 districts in the Missoula community. Lolo, Clinton, Bonner, Hellgate Elementary, Target Range, DeSmet, Potomac, etc. Those districts serve their own students K through 8, but then when they graduate from 8th grade, they come to our district for high school, 9 through 12. So that's part of the reason we have to maintain 2 separate districts. So when we do all our state reporting, we have to do it twice. We have technically 2 different budgets. We technically have 2 different school boards. We have an 11-member school board. 7 members are elected from the elementary district. 4 are elected from districts within the county to serve and represent those independent K-8 districts. So on elementary only items, 7 of our board members get to vote. On any issues that are high school issues, all 11 get to vote. So it's a little bit awkward at times, and it gets really challenging with the budget at times. We in Missoula County Public Schools believe, obviously, our mission has to be to serve all students, to support the achievement of all students, and to help all students to graduate. You may be familiar with the term Graduation Matters. It's an initiative we started in the district some years ago. It eventually became a state initiative. And at that point in time, we were concerned because Missoula, like many districts across the state, weren't seeing the numbers of students that we thought we should see graduate. At that point in time, we had about an 82% graduation rate. And if you think about that, in a community that's an education community, a university a mile down the road, that wasn't satisfactory. So we started Graduation Matters, and our graduation rate has steadily improved. We just got our data last week for the 2018 year, when we had about an 88% graduation rate. It's a handbook.
When you calculate graduation rate, when does that start versus?
Perfect.
Yeah.
So it used to be that each state calculated graduation rates differently. And so the federal government stepped in and developed a formula, and it's a 4-year cohort graduation rate. So you take everybody that enters in a freshman class and you track them over time. And any students who move in over the course of time are also added to that cohort. So if you have, say, a 2.5% dropout rate, you would assume that 2.5% of your freshmen drop out, 2.5% of your sophomores, etc. So if you follow that freshman cohort, and if they lose 2.5% their freshman year, 2.5% their sophomore year, 2.5% their junior year, and 2.5% their senior year, by the time you get that cohort graduation rate, you've lost 10% of your kids, and you have a 90% graduation rate. So that's how that graduation rate is calculated. What's important to us, though, was not just that kids graduate, graduation matters, but that we make sure that what they obtain matters. We want kids to be college and or career ready. We used to talk only college ready or career ready. Now it's got to be both. We find that a lot of people that transition from high school into the workforce ultimately will seek at some point in their lifetime post-secondary education. So we have to meet both objectives. So we also know that almost every kid that walks through our doors carries a computer in his or her pocket. When we, people my generation, were in school, there was an awful lot of rote memorization, a lot of facts and figures. The question is, in today's day and age, do we need to spend as much time teaching things that a kid can Google as we did in the 1970s? And if we don't, where should our emphasis be? So we talk about a 21st century education. And what we're really talking about is creation of knowledge or application of knowledge and skills, as opposed to rote memorization. And I hope as we move through tonight, you'll see some examples of that. And then again, we're a governmental agency. We have to be fiscally responsible. We have to be accountable for what we do. So those are some of the things that I'll touch on this evening. Yes?
If that's provided that all students should get an education, why does the school districts not fully fund for the visually impaired?
Actually, we do. We have Braille specialists, and we do support students that have visual impairments. Again, those students qualify under the IDEA Act, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And we actually develop individualized plans, access the state library for Braille materials, etc. We do the same for students that have hearing impairments, etc.
Actually, you don't. I'm in the Lions Club and we buy stuff for kids all the time because you guys don't fund it.
Oh, certainly. There are some things that don't come as part of the core curriculum, but in terms of the core curriculum, we do support those students who are visually impaired. So at any rate, continuing on, we in 2014 developed what we called our Achievement for All plan, and it's the handout that you have in the booklet. And essentially it's our 5-year strategic plan. And I'm not going to spend much time with it, but I do want to show you a couple cases. Thank you. We talked about 4 specific domains, and I'm going to skip over the core beliefs. You can read those for yourselves. But we wanted to focus first and foremost on the learning domain. And we'll talk a little bit about that right now, but just so you see how this is organized. In the learning quadrant, we established some goals. And of course, achievement and graduation for all students, regardless of their circumstance, is the goal. The third column then talks about some of the programs and priorities that we undertook. And again, we're famous for acronyms, and you'll see it's laden with acronyms. But we'll talk about some of those as we move through. This 5-year strategic plan should culminate in June of 2019. And the fourth column then would have what some of our expected outcomes are by June of 2019. And the last column was basically to inform the students, the parents, and the community of what their role could be with regard to those goals and objectives. The second quadrant is our talent quadrant. It's basically human resources. We are one of the largest employers in the city and county. We have about 1,100 employees. Our general fund budget is about $70 million a year. And we serve presently about 9,200 students. So at any rate, recruiting and retaining teachers is critical for us. But in addition to teachers, we have a lot of support staff, classified staff that support students or supports our facilities. We are one of 6 school districts in the nation right now that's part of a collaborative working on a teacher recruitment and retention project. You may hear nationally about teacher shortages. Missoula, fortunately, has not experienced that. We'll post a job, and within about a week, we'll get 60 applications. We're very fortunate in that regard. And part of that is, number one, we're a university community. But number two, there are a lot of students who graduate from post-secondary education programs, go to rural Montana or other places to teach, with their ultimate goal being migrate back to the larger cities in Montana. So we benefit from that migration also. But there is nationally, of course, a teacher shortage. One of the other districts in our collaborative is Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They opened this school year with 50 teaching positions they were unable to fill to start the school year. So they started with substitute teachers and hired people that had college degrees but no certification. They actually went to the Philippines and hired people on work visas. And we, for the first time this year, are seeing up on the High Line where Montana schools have hired out of the Philippines too, in areas where it's tough to recruit to. So Missoula hasn't had that experience yet, but it's real, and we need to be planning ahead for that eventuality. So really we're focused on how we can support and develop the staff that we hire in the school district. So a good portion of this is about the professional development and the in-service opportunities we provide to kind of grow our own.
Mark, before you go on, can you say again how many students? I lost that number.
9,200. Well, 9,172 as of yesterday.
Okay.
The third quadrant is operations. It's largely about our facilities and about our, oh, actually that's not true. operations talks about a whole number of things, including the partnerships with business, the community, etc., how we can enhance our programming, and facilities and environment is the fourth and final quadrant. And you can take a look at those. But we just wanted to include this so that you had a reference as you look through the materials that have been provided to you. Yes?
Are school board meetings open to the public?
They are. They're broadcast on MCAT. The vast majority are broadcast on MCAT. I'm actually skipping for the first time in my tenure a school board meeting tonight. Yay! We meet twice a month. Now, we used to meet once a month and then had committee meetings through the noon hour, and we found that stifled public participation. It's really difficult for people to get to committee meetings at noon. So the year I became superintendent, we made a decision instead to have 2 board meetings a month. So we meet the second and fourth Tuesday of every month. And that way we could meet in the evenings, have our full discussions instead of having them at committee meetings, and engage more of the public. And all those meetings are broadcast on MCAT. Tonight's a special meeting. They're actually working on how they're going to develop the process to replace me. So it wasn't critical that I be there. But at any rate, that's going on tonight, and it's not being broadcast. So with regard to our achievement plans, and you'll see this detailed within the brochure, we felt that in order to improve our graduation rates, as well as the quality of the student we graduate, we need to look at student engagement differently. It's no longer sufficient to have a classroom where you have 5 rows, 6 students in each row, and stand and deliver kind of instruction. So we wanted to look at how we could better engage students. So one of the ways we did that is through the International Baccalaureate program. So Hellgate High School, Big Sky High School, Washington Middle School is now in candidacy, Franklin Elementary School is in candidacy, and Lewis and Clark is already approved as an IB school. IB basically says that we're going to take an integrated look in units of inquiry that are thematic in nature, but still teach all the concepts that we identify as being important in our curriculum. So teachers have to be involved in intensive planning. Then students go through rigorous assessment, and it's actually sent to outside evaluators in addition to being evaluated within the district. So rigorous program.
Can you pronounce the IB?
Yes, International Baccalaureate. And the IB program allows students then to accrue college credits while they're still in high school. So if a student graduates from either Big Sky or Hellgate with the full IB diploma, they're guaranteed automatic admission to the University of Montana with sophomore standing into the Global Leadership Initiative program. So there's some certain benefit there for the students. Yes?
So what do the elementary and middle school IB programs do then?
Again, they're just integrated thematic units with global perspective, an emphasis on some research, community action service projects, those kinds of things. They don't get any kind of additional credit, but it's just a different way of structuring the content.
And every kiddo at Franklin Elementary School will be involved in that, or?
They're in the candidacy phase, so they're developing their curriculum right now, but that's what they're working to implement. Yes?
So every student in one of these schools is enrolled into the IB program?
Yes,
Every
it's more a framework for the way teachers go about doing their instructional practice than anything else. But again, it's still the same content, largely. Dual language immersion, DLI. As you know, internationally, students typically study a second or a third language beginning in early elementary school. About 6 years ago at Paxton Elementary School, the staff and the parent community determined that they would like to take on a similar project. And they visited schools in the Salt Lake City, Utah area to see just exactly what that would entail. So we've made a concerted effort to hire teaching staff that have either a Spanish endorsement, but preferably native Spanish-speaking experience to teach in those classrooms. And we started off with students having an option of going into dual language or a traditional track. Now the entire school at Paxton, about 480 students, is in the dual language immersion program. They spend half their day, beginning with kindergarten, in total Spanish immersion. Teacher never speaks English. Then at midday, they'll swap to an English-speaking teacher, and another class will go in. Kids become fluent at a pretty early age, able to read, to write, etc. It's really a remarkable program. Of course, we wanted to monitor and make sure that that wasn't at the expense of student achievement. And as you compare Paxton's achievement results with all our other schools, again, actually, in many respects, they actually exceed district averages. So it's been really well received. CTE is an acronym that stands for Career and Technical Education.
Sorry, I have a question about DLI. Given that it's been a success at Paxton, is there any plan to expand it throughout the district?
We've had some conversations. We've had conversations about equity of access. The problem is we're really struggling to hire Spanish-speaking teachers. You don't find very many in Montana, and there's not specific endorsement or certification. So that's our challenge. We're working right now to expand to Washington Middle School, so that as those students graduate from Paxton and go through Washington, we can replicate similar programming, and it's been a real challenge to hire Spanish-speaking teachers.
What about other languages?
We've talked about that too, whether we might look at French or others. We have a significant number of high school students that take Mandarin, and a pretty good number of students that take Arabic, and those actually were funded originally by the federal government because they're considered critical languages, and Department of Defense actually was the one who came up with the grant that allowed us to start our Arabic program. But again, the problem is teaching staff. If you look around the country, Spanish has been the second language that's primarily spoken and taught in most schools, and really challenging to recruit enough teachers in other languages for immersion programs.
Mark,
yes.
Question: are you going to get to the budget, or can I? I'm curious about how.
Sure, I am going to get to the budget. So, thank you. CTE is Career and Tech Ed. Yes.
When I was in high school, date myself, we had college prep, and we had the kids who were taking auto mechanics and ag, and a lot of the girls advanced home economics. So there were different tracks going on. Can you describe what the tracks are now, or are there any distinguishable tracks?
Perfect question. I am going to talk about that actually as we get to it. Career and Tech Ed, K-12. We have one of the state funding mechanisms supporting specifically career and technology education. And as was referenced, we used to consider it more vocational programs. So you might have had welding and industrial arts or shop class, those kinds of things. It's really transforming now so that it's more like a course in manufacturing that would take basic welding, etc., and teach students how to fabricate, etc. You would find that there's a lot of early engineering and those kinds of programs that we're engaged in. We wrote a $250,000 grant request to a foundation down the Bitterroot that funded implementation kindergarten through 5th grade of something called Project Lead the Way, which is introduction to design and modeling and early engineering principles that we're integrating with math and science programs now. And we're working to bring that on board in each of our 9 elementary schools. In the high schools, career and tech ed classes have changed dramatically. You don't find sewing and textiles like you used to. You don't find the traditional home economics, although you will find a culinary arts program. In industrial arts and industrial technology, you'll find more fabrication, manufacturing, etc. We have, in Missoula County Public Schools, the largest vocational agricultural program in the state. We run a farm out on South Avenue. We've got 80 acres out there, and it's an actual live farm. We're building a meat processing lab that will open the end of this month, and we have a USDA inspector who will be on site 2 days a week full-time, so that as the kids go through the whole process of birth, raise, process, we'll see the full scope in our career and tech ed programs of farm to table in the truest sense. So career and tech ed is important. As I said earlier, it used to be either college prep or vocational technical. That's not sufficient anymore. It's got to be college and career ready. We also know from our career and tech ed teachers that particularly as you get into things like computer science and early engineering, the math and the science education that's required to be successful in those programs is very different than it was in our days. So again, making sure that it's rigorous but relevant instruction. Montana Behavioral Initiative and MTSS, Multi-Tiered Systems of Support, go together. I don't know that there is any other way to describe this really, but I think it used to be when many of us went to school, there was an expectation that you were likely raised in a home where manners were a priority and you came to school and knew how to behave and knew what the expectations were, and there were real significant consequences at home if that didn't happen. And unfortunately, I think we find that in this day and age, we don't find all students entering school with those school readiness skills. So we have found that we need to be very explicit and intentional to teach desired expectations and behaviors. The analogy I might use is many kids at home will get thousands of practice opportunities and reinforcements with regard to basic manners before they come to school. Others may come to school and never had that experience, and for a teacher to stand in front of that student and say to student one, here's my expectation. If you've had that experience, maybe you'll respond. If you haven't had that experience, I might need to give you those hundreds of practice opportunities. That's been a challenge for us. But we're part of what's known as the Montana Behavioral Initiative, and our teachers actually develop lessons specifically to incorporate teaching those school and manner type skills to all students so that we can function appropriately. Attendant to that also is mental health issues. We hear about the mental health crisis in the United States, and I think it would be obvious to all of you that mental health problems don't begin when you turn 18 or are older. We can see in kindergarten kids, 5-year-olds, kids that are at risk. So a significant change in the last about 10 years or so. We actually have contracted teams of mental health therapists. We contract with Western Montana Mental Health that are based in each one of our schools. And students that are identified as in need of therapy actually get that. Many of them are Medicaid qualified. Medicaid supports the program. But those services are offered in schools so the student doesn't have to be pulled out and miss large chunks of school and miss out on part of their education in order to receive those very necessary services. So mental health interventions are a critical part of MTSS also. A little bit in the news over the last year about English language arts. We just this past year adopted and are in the process of implementing a new English language arts curriculum. And the easiest way for me to express it, I think, is that just as career and tech ed has changed, so has the need with English language arts. In addition to being good word callers and good readers of fiction material, students that are involved in the new economy, the science, the technology, the engineering, need to know how to read informational text and need to be able to write in terms of that same style. And it's very different than what you do with traditional fiction-based reading. So we have to have a blend. It's important, of course, to continue to honor the great American novels and to teach those novels, but you also need to teach the critical thinking skills and the informational text reading skills that are associated with what we call STEM education or STEAM education, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. So that's a bit of a shift, and we're investing a lot right now in teaching professional development programs for our staff. And then we've implemented a model of continuous curriculum review. It used to be that we would review a curriculum every 5 years. you'd go through a process, you'd adopt materials, and you'd kind of leave it alone for 5 years, and then you'd do it over again when the cycle came up. Now, on a continual basis, we're doing review and enhancement of each curricular area in a constant process. So today we actually had a large group of teachers working on math curriculum. We also had a group of teachers working on English language arts curriculum. So continual process. We're in our 4th year of construction. We started in 2016. We passed the bond issue in 2015, the largest bond issue in the state of Montana, $158 million. And that project is to essentially rebuild or remodel 18 facilities. And we just hired our 18th set of contractors. So we'll take a tour here in just a few minutes and look at what's happening at Hellgate High School. And this will be a perfect example of what's happening across the district. But I'll give you a little bit of verbal input. If you're familiar with this building at all and you entered on the Gerald Avenue side, it used to be that when you entered the doors, the first thing you encountered was a significant stairway, and you had to go up the stairs, you had to turn left and go down the hallway probably 70 feet before you ever encountered a human being. In the days post-Columbine, post-Sandy Hook, post-Marjorie Stone Douglas, all the incidents with which we're all too familiar, that's just not appropriate. So one of the significant things we've done in our construction projects is worked on safety and security and created entry vestibules where there's a single set of doors that people can come through. The second set of doors is generally locked. You need to check with a receptionist. He or she needs to determine whether or not you should have access to the building. So we're controlling that access into all our buildings as we complete these projects. Some of you know that door locked before all of you got in. We have programmable locks on all our doors, and all of us have key cards. And we'll even actually have capacity for students to all have key cards in the relative near future. So if a student, say they're on an athletic team and they have a weight training class at 6:30 in the morning, we can program it so their key card would work on the door to the gym. They could scan it on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We might program it so they can go in and do their weight training, have access to the building when they need it, but then the building can be locked at other times. So again, enhancing that safety and security is critical. We're rewiring all our buildings for technology. That's been a huge undertaking. Hellgate High School is a prime example. It was heated by 2 75-year-old boilers. One of them went out 2 years ago. We had a great deal of difficulty getting it recertified. We welded and welded and welded until finally they let it pass. Highly inefficient also. So one of the big projects here at Hellgate, which is not visible, is that we have converted from steam heat to hot water heat to high efficiency boilers. We'll get a great return on investment, but it's required the entire building to be replumbed for heat. Huge project. You'll see as we walk tonight, there are contractors still working. They're painting up on the 3rd floor. We've got somebody stringing internet cabling throughout the building. They're working on a new library. A lot happening. This is a $22 million project. In 2007, 2008, the legislature required all school districts to evaluate their deferred maintenance. So we had a group of architects and engineers evaluate each facility, and that report identified literally hundreds of millions of dollars worth of deferred maintenance. Again, we requested and the community supported $158 million, which was a huge ask of this community. Unfortunately, it doesn't accomplish everything we would like to accomplish, but it gets us partway down the road. Back to your question about budget. People would naturally say, why do you get into a space where you have hundreds of million dollars worth of deferred maintenance? And part of that comes back to how the state funds education. Facility funding right now comes all from the local level. And we have a general fund budget, and I know I'm getting ahead of my slides here, that supports basically our normal day-to-day operations. And right now, our general fund budget on the high school side, 88% of that budget goes to salaries and benefits. About another 4% goes to fixed costs like heat and lights. And we have relatively little money that we call discretionary, which has to purchase textbooks and the like. Very similar picture on the elementary side. So I'm going to bail out of this for a minute and talk just a little bit about budget, and then we can take a walk and come back and have some more conversation. And I apologize, these graphs may be a little bit hard to read from back there, but I'll explain them as we get.
I have a question in the meantime.
Yes.
What percentage of your instruction, let's say at the high school level, is face-to-face and textbook versus online computer?
Everything that we fund is face-to-face. Some students do access the Montana Digital Academy for some courses. That's online instruction, but that's funded solely by the state, separate from our budget. I would say probably 95% of our instruction is face-to-face. We have relatively little use of the online courses. Thank you. Perfect. So this worked perfectly when I started. So if you look at our high school general fund budget, our general fund budget is right now about $29 million a year. And the graph's obviously pretty simple, but just to illustrate, 88% of that budget is humans, salary and benefits. And that makes sense. We're a service-related industry. We get the best bang for our buck by putting people in front of students and working with students. About $1.206 million goes to those fixed costs, heat, lights, etc. Discretionary, about $2.4 million. And I'll break down what that discretionary means here in just a minute. Maybe I will. I can't see my scroll bar.
It's on the board to that.
Oh yeah, there we go. Thank you. So first, the salary and benefits. Teaching staff is about 61.5%. About another 13% is benefits, health insurance, primarily. About 6.2% is administrative. About 5.9% is custodial and trades and crafts. About 5.3% is clerical and secretarial. About 3.7% on the high school is for paraeducators, which is teaching assistants. That's a little bit of a misnomer because special education funds paraeducators outside of our general fund budget also. So there are additional supports for students that may have disabling conditions that are not reflected here. About 1.88% of the budget goes to substitute teacher costs. About 1.8% or 1.1%, excuse me, goes to termination pay. When somebody retires, we have a contribution we have to make to the state as part of teachers' retirement. About 0.72% supports food service and athletic trainers and the like. And about 0.64% is just characterized as other. So you can see, again, most of the money goes right to classroom teaching staff. In terms of our elementary, very similar picture, 90% goes to salary and benefits. A little over 3% goes to utilities, and about 7% left for the discretionary side. Whoops. Sorry. My dexterity with the keys is not great. To give you an example then of, there it is, the discretionary. To give you an example of the discretionary, so again, discretionary is about 8% of the budget. The largest portion of that discretionary, about 51%, is supplies, equipment, software, textbook, etc. About another 20% is listed as contracted services. So community policing. We have school resource officers All our copy machines that are leased are in there. We have a special education preschool. We have a federal mandate to serve all students that are identified with disabilities beginning on their 3rd birthday. And those costs are built into that 20%, and we do that at Jefferson Elementary School. Then about 11% goes to our property and liability insurance costs. About 6.29% supports field trips and student travel costs. About 4.3% supports teacher professional development and in-service trainings, travel associated with that. About 4% for postage, telephones, etc. And about 2.2% for repair and maintenance services. So back to the question about deferred maintenance. In our general fund, we don't have capacity to install a new boiler. When things like that happen, we have to go to the taxpayer. And that's one of the unfortunate ways that we're funded in the state of Montana. And that presents a constant challenge for us. Okay, now am I going to be able to get back to my PowerPoint? So what I'd like to do is, you probably need a bit of a break. Why don't we take a quick tour, and while we tour, if you need to use the restroom, we're going to walk right by them, and then we'll come back in and get into a few more topics. And what I think we'll do is go back the way you came in, and we'll look at the dining commons and kitchen area first. Those things,
neither can Molly.
Molly can't do Fridays either. We're in part of the former cafeteria space now. They've moved to more of a dining commons concept, and it's a place for kids to hang out, do homework, to eat, etc. The kitchen used to be located in this area. This is being converted to part of the new library. Unfortunately, you can't see it from this side, but we'll see it from the other side in just a moment. This is stairway and view trying to improve access and elevator chase in. Unfortunately, we aren't funding the elevator right now. That'll have to come later. But presently, there's a single elevator in the building, which is a challenge. This area used to be an exterior service courtyard, and you'll see when we get to the other side, we'll be able to look down into it. It's the new library. Whoops, but they're shutting off lights. And we're about 2 weeks from moving in. So the new entrance, again, is one of the important assets in the construction. So this will be, as soon as construction is complete, basically the only open entry for the general public. You'll come in, you'll have to check in, and one of the people in the reception area will actually have to key the door to allow it to open if you're to have access to the building. Again, safety and security has become altogether too critical.
What kind of safety do you have for the people behind the wall?
Limited, quite honestly. One of the questions we've received is a bulletproof glass, that kind of thing. It's not. We have film to keep it from shattering, etc. But bulletproof glass, for example, is just totally cost prohibitive. But that is a concern, obviously, and a challenge for us. So if we go this way, you'll see what the old entryway looked like.
Christine, come down a little bit more. Yep. Come, actually, why don't you come down in front of Jared? There we go. Okay, here's the first one. Da da da. And next one. Okay, here we go. Thank you, everybody. Okay.
Those old boilers are down under there. They've been removed. The new system has been installed. You can see they're starting to install the stacks. They'll do the flooring and finish the stacks in about the next 10 days or so, and then the library will actually start to move. One of the questions that I just got was, why is it so tall? Why the volume? They wanted to get natural light into the library, so they wanted to go above the previous roof line, and it really wasn't that much more expensive because we utilized the exterior walls that existed previously. So you'll see that we've got the old exterior walls both to the east and west.
I think you're so bidding.
Yes.
a history of the library for you? Just create one. George Francis Hellgate was a librarian prospector, gold miner. He invented the first library with Dewey Decimal, his brother George Dewey. None of this is true, of course, but that'll be good background.
Library space in the other building is being converted to science lab.
You didn't ask for facts.
So, all that area will be retrofitted also. There will also be a culinary arts classroom over there. The library we felt should be the heart and soul of the school. It should be right in the middle. We wanted the great visibility, so there'll be significant glass on both sides, and we're really excited for what the future holds for Hellgate. If you look to the far side, you see the circulation desk down there. That was what was behind the distribution as we walked through that commons area. So it'll be accessible from the ground level on that side also. Okay, so if Peter wants to go back to the elevator that way, and then I guess there are two options for you. We can go out into the main hall and just circle down and meet you back there. If that works. We'll complete this. Okay, so I'm just going to take a few more minutes and wrap it up, and then open it for any questions you have. But again, as we think about the 21st century, we need to think of ourselves differently as an organization. So we had conversation about what our vision and mission should be. And a district group landed on the following. We communicate, we collaborate, we think critically, and we create. We are Missoula County Public Schools, educational leaders in a global society, fostering uncompromising excellence and empowering all learners. And that is an ambitious statement for us to live up to. I want to talk a little bit about how we're working to do that. So again, our focus is largely on student achievement. These are just some snapshots. First of all, the students at Missoula County High Schools compete at state, regional, national, and international competitions in a variety of different activities, everything from athletics, speech and debate, DECA, business, professionals of America, robotics, choir, and band and orchestra. All juniors in the state of Montana take the ACT now. It's actually funded by the state, and our students perform a point higher than the state average on the ACT. You know, it's scaled 1 to 36, so point's a point, I guess. Our 6th grade students performed 7 to 9% higher than the state average in both English language arts and math on the National Smarter Balanced Assessment. That's something in which we take great pride. And again, part of how we help those students to apply the knowledge is providing opportunities like robotics competitions. Students, we have middle school as well as high school robotics teams where they actually create, build, and then compete in various competitions with their robots. Jane, in part of her introduction, talked about traffic circles, and many of us are familiar with the roundabouts in the community. We have started a computer science pathway that we're teaching at Sentinel High School, and the students in that class entered a national competition to develop a prototype of a signaling device so that people can navigate more efficiently through roundabouts. And they're actually one of the national finalists, so we'll know shortly whether or not their project will actually win the national competition. Our 3rd grade students, the 3rd grade's important, and I'll tell you why in a minute, but our 3rd grade students performed 13% higher than the state average on the Smarter Balanced Assessment in English Language Arts. 3rd grade's critical for us because in grades K, 1, 2, and 3, we really teach students how to read. And our belief is once you get beyond 3rd grade, students are then having to read to learn. So learn to read, then read to learn. And we know nationally from the statistics that a student that is not a proficient reader at 3rd grade is much, much more likely to be a dropout. That's the critical cutoff point for us. Our 5th grade students, again, culmination of elementary school, moving into middle school, performed 12% higher than the state average on Smarter Balanced in mathematics. And we've been able to maintain student achievement while approaching our instructional programs differently, focusing on strategic looks at 21st century education. Again, an acronym, STEM, Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics is the direction that we're putting a lot of emphasis. We're also putting emphasis on career and technology education. What you see here is students in the Health Science Academy at Big Sky. Students as a cohort have an opportunity to apply for and be accepted into the Health Science Academy at Big Sky. 90 freshmen are admitted each year. So ultimately, when you have 4 grade levels represented, you've got about 350 or so students at Big Sky in the Health Science Academy. The idea is not that a student leaving 8th grade and entering 9th grade chooses his or her future career. But the idea is we're going to teach all the content that these students need to know, their science, their math, their English language arts, in the context of the health sciences, so that they can have real-world application, so that it's meaningful to them, rather than just isolated, siloed learning in each of those content areas. Very popular program, and the students do really well. I have referenced, in addition to STEM, STEAM. The A in STEM is arts, and you know Missoula's an arts community. About 4 years ago, we applied to the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts to be what's known as a Kennedy Center Any Given Child City, and we submitted that application jointly with the city of Missoula, and we're one of 16 cities that has been chosen to participate in the program. Cities like Portland, Oregon, Nashville, Tennessee, Austin, Texas, Cleveland, Ohio, Missoula, Montana. The Kennedy Center, in the first 2 years of the program, then sent their professionals to Missoula, and we taught all of our K-8 teachers how to integrate art into regular content. So use art as a modality to teach other content. An example I like to cite, I observed a class at Russell Elementary School where the teacher was teaching place value and the value of money. And she cleared all the desks out of the middle of the classroom, and they did it through a kinesthetic learning program. It was dance and movement. She taught the kids through these different activities, then brought the kids back together and did an assessment at the end of the unit. And it was phenomenal. There was basically 100% retention. And I would argue that in addition to the traditional verbal input, associating the movement and the kinesthetic learning reinforced that lesson significantly for those students. That's the kind of thing we're trying to accomplish with arts integration. It's not arts only for art's sake, but it's arts as a modality to teach other content. So, I had a question just as we were leaving about how we're actually funded. Why do we have to go to the voters all the time for our funding, for our operations levy? We've been very fortunate in Missoula in that for 17 years in a row, the voters have supported every request we've put out there. State funding is challenging. It's challenging to understand. And we actually have 9 different budgeted funds. The biggest one is our general fund, and that's the one that funds teacher salaries and our operations, basically. Other funds might include things like transportation to and from school, or the retirement fund, etc. I earlier referenced the state constitutional guarantee to equity for opportunity to education. Well, there are lots of communities like Missoula where initiatives have gone before the voters and always passed. And there are other communities in the state where they never pass one. So ultimately, you ended up with some disequilibrium. And of course, the American way, we had a lawsuit. And ultimately, the decision was handed down that if we have disparate budgets from district to district across the state, we don't have equity to the opportunity for education. We can fund things that other communities cannot fund. So the state basically developed, and this is a huge oversimplification, but this budget formula. that basically says every district is obligated to meet a certain threshold with regard to the budget, and it's driven by your enrollment. You as a local have capacity to exceed that base, but there's a cap. You can only go so far, or else again you create an unequal situation. So we have some various components that are funded, again, based on enrollment. We have funding that comes for Indian education for all. We have funding that comes for at-risk students. We have funding that it's called quality educator. It's basically if you have certified people. We have funding that's to close the achievement gap between various groups, those that are economically disadvantaged, homeless, Native, etc. We have direct state aid that comes into play, and that's generated by a variety of revenue streams for the state, but it's allocated by the legislature. Then the state also levies mills on local taxpayers, and that's used to fund, again, a variety of things, but there's a state guaranteed tax base. So locals can go over the limit, but if you were fortunate enough to have a nice industry in your community, like Frenchtown used to have Smurfit Stone, they could levy, and it wouldn't really impact the taxpayers individually. The bulk of the money would come from Smurfit Stone. So the state came back and said, we need to have some way to balance that out. So there's a guaranteed tax base for each school district, which again is a complicated formula. Then if you have money at year's end that's reappropriated, that factors in. And if you have non-levy revenue like tuition, etc., that all factors in. Then, based on enrollment, you calculate what the maximum budget could be, and it's your local mills, any tuition you collect for out-of-district students, and any excess money you have in your reserves that funds that over base budget. So, I think I have on here, I'm going to skip that one. Here's a historical view of our district, and I'll explain why things happen as they do. The blue represents the increase to our budget in any one of those given years. So this starts with 2009 and runs to the current year. What's important to know is between 2009 and this year, Missoula County Public Schools has grown by 811 students. If you look around town, you see what's happening in terms of development. That's happening commercially, it's happening residentially, and it's impacting our schools. So the budget is enrollment driven. You can see some spikes in our budget based on increased enrollments. Right now, for the last 3 years, we've been increasing about 150 students a year. When we did our demographic projections originally back in 2008, 2009, we had 8,200 students. We're almost 1,000 students larger than that right now. And the projection 5 years from now, 2023, 24, is an additional 500 students. So again, we're a growing community. It continues to tax us. We have large class sizes. While we were walking, a question was asked. Used to be that we had this open enrollment. An 8th grader could ask to go to any high school he or she wanted, and largely that was honored. In the last couple of years, we've scaled that back down for a couple of reasons. We're hitting capacity in our high schools in terms of class sizes. It's really challenging to plan staffing when we have that unknown. And we're really making a concerted effort to try and equalize our enrollments across the 3 high schools. So largely, unless there are extenuating circumstances, we originally enroll people in their home school by geocode, and then they can request an exception to the attendance area. And if space is available, we're actually doing a lottery. And each application is assigned a number, and we'll just draw numbers when spots open.
It's regulated how many children a teacher can see per day, right? It's not class size specific so much as it is kids overall through the day?
That's true at some levels and not at others. So state accreditation standards say in kindergarten, 1st, and 2nd grade, your class size is a maximum of 20 students. If you go over that size, you have to assign paraeducator support to that teacher. Again, our budget doesn't grow as fast as our enrollment. This year, we have 23 classrooms K through 5 that exceed state accreditation standards.
Wow.
Part of that will be remedied as we finish our construction projects. We'll have space for new classrooms. But the reality is we don't have the budget at this point to hire that many staff members. Right now, a new staff member on average costs us $52,000 a year between salary and benefits. So you do the math, and even 10 additional staff members, $500,000. But we just don't have that capacity in our budget. At middle school and high schools, the rule is those teachers cannot see more than 150 students a day. So in most situations, we say that's 5 classes of 30 students per class. And we have many situations where we're at 30 across the board. At Washington Middle School, we have capacity, I think it's at 7th grade for 210 students, 7 classes of 30, and we have 210 students right on the nose.
Wow.
That's the kind of situation that we're facing across the district right now. The yellow bar then on this graph indicates the local taxpayer support in those years where we have budget increases. So part of this is going to appear a little funky because of what the legislature does, and of course this is a legislative year. So some years the legislature will say essentially you have authority to hit your cap, but you have to tap into the local taxpayers to do it. Other years the state fully funds us, so we don't run a levy. We had a big increase in 2015-16 following legislative action. But it was all state money. We didn't run a local levy. We had the same follow in 2016-17, but then we had the special session of the legislature and some other things that happened, and the vast majority of the money still came from the state, but we had to tap the local taxpayers to a significant tune also in order to maintain budget authority.
And do local taxpayers have a say
yes,
in that?
We ran an election. It's the May school election every year where that's voted upon. In addition to our general fund budget, for example, the special legislative session eliminated transportation block grants, which was a $380,000 hit to our school district. So when we go back to discretionary, if we're going to continue to transport students, we have to do it with our own funding as opposed to what was previously from the state. So that's part of our challenge with regard to budgets. Same is true with the high school. Part of the reason you see much smaller increases in the high school budget is that we went through a period of stagnant enrollment. Now those increased enrollments that have gone through the elementary and the middle school are hitting the high schools. Right now, our entering freshman class in high school will be a little over 900 students next year. About 600 of those come from our 3 middle schools, but about 300 from the K-8 partner schools. The vast majority of those go to Big Sky High School. Big Sky will have about 310 freshmen next year. Only 66 come from our middle schools. The rest come from the K-8 partner districts. Part of the challenge that presents for us is how do we then articulate curriculum well K-12? So we work to try and coordinate to a degree with our feeder schools, making sure that, again, we've got programs that transition well from 8th grade on into high school.
Question.
We had a period of time, just a second, I'll get to you. We had a period of time here, several years, where we did not run any local levy on the high school side because our enrollment was stagnant. We've started to see those increases hit the high school, so last year we ran a $178,000 levy that the voters supported.
Have you seen any changes in diversity, ethnicity-wise?
Very little. We have about 8% of our student enrollment is Native American. That's our largest group. We are presently serving about 75 students that are refugee students that have come since the IRC opened their office here in Missoula. They speak a lot of varied languages, Tigrinyas, a challenge to find interpreters, those kinds of things. But again, working to serve those students as best we can also. Yes.
You talked about the feeder schools and coordinating your curriculum with the K through 8 coming from all the areas around Missoula. And it sounds like that's a challenge. I know that it's a challenge to even get the same days off in different schools. My kids went to Hellgate Elementary, and some of my other kids went to Big Sky High School, and so having the same spring break was next to impossible because that doesn't get coordinated well. Is there any talk about pulling those feeder schools into the Missoula School District?
The state has had a history of local control. And essentially, I think that until there's some financial incentive that the legislature puts out for unification, that likely won't happen. There are, and I shouldn't try and say this number off the top of my head, but there are like 400 school districts in the state of Montana. I mean, it's incredible because every small community has its own school district. So I think an economy of scale comes into play, and that might ultimately get addressed. I see Chris sitting behind you, and I want to come back to the coordination of curriculum because there's an effort to coordinate curriculum. And when we do our review and adoption, at times we'll have representatives from those K-8 partner districts that sit in and participate. There's also been a group that has been a collaborative with the K-8 schools to work on curriculum development together. And Chris coordinated that for a number of years. So,
Mark?
Yes.
I think you're done with the budget, or it looks like it.
I am.
And I just wanted to find a good spot to interject this question, but I remember when my kids were in grade school here in Missoula, not just recently, there was an FRC, Family Resource Center, which is something I've never had when I was growing up, and I think that's I mean, I wanted you to talk a little bit about that, kind of what that means, and then my understanding is, and tell me if this is true, that there are homeless kids in every single school in Missoula, and what those challenges are. And I mean, this is something on the city side, it's an issue we're always dealing with. It's a hard issue, and the schools are a big component in terms of these people's
Thank you.
lives.
That's a great question. So, Missoula's demographic. I think many of us, unless you're engaged in this work, may not understand the complexity of our demographic. Right now, 42% of the students that we serve in Missoula County Public Schools qualify under the federal guidelines for federal meal assistance, free or reduced breakfasts and lunches, 42%. We have pockets within the community where 2 of our schools actually have more than 80% of their families qualify for meal assistance. People don't see those pockets of poverty in Missoula as readily as maybe they should, but that's a significant issue. Gwen asked about the homeless situation. How many homeless students do we serve in Missoula County Public Schools? Anybody want to venture a guess?
40.
Heather?
1,000.
I heard 40, 500, 1,000. In December, it was 468. And it's likely significantly undercounted.
And is that K through 12?
That's K-12. So we receive funding through the McKinney-Vento Act to provide services for homeless families or families in transition. And Gwen mentioned family resource centers. We also have what we call FIT coordinators, families in transition. The federal definition is, again, as you would expect of a federal definition, somewhat complex. Everybody that's homeless isn't, living under the bridge or out on Reserve Street. But there are people in motels, there are people in cars, there are people that have lost family housing, so they're doubling up with relatives or others. There are people that might be in transitional housing. But again, the count is really difficult for us to achieve. So citywide, they do a point-in-time count to try and establish what the homeless population was. Federal regulations prohibit us from doing that in schools when they do that count. We know we have a lot of high school students that are homeless, emancipated, couch surfing, etc. So we just opened the new Willard Alternative High School last week. We built into the high school a laundry facility and a private shower facility to accommodate some of the needs of those kids who are homeless. In order to try and gather some data when the point in time homeless count occurs with our high school students in particular, we're actually going to have food trucks go to the neighborhood around the high school, and we're going to provide vouchers to the kids that we believe are homeless or at risk of homelessness, encouraging them to go to the food trucks, and we're going to have the survey workers ask them to complete the brief survey so that we can get better data on our high school kids. Again, we have fair data, but whether or not we're catching everybody who needs the services remains to be seen.
Hey, so speaking of income disparity, I'm from the north side, west side neighborhood, and Lowell is riding the awesome struggle bus, and I'm fortunate in my job to work with kids from every school. But so how do you distribute the budget? Is it based on number of enrollment per school? And then what do you do for our neighborhoods where we have more socioeconomic disparity? I see the difference every day in my job of a kid that goes to Rattlesnake and the kids that goes to Lowell. And so does that play any effect in Missoula? I'm just interested to know.
So good question. So when we budget, we don't assign a staffing budget to each school individually. We go out and we hire the best teachers for every position that's available, and that's all part of the district level budget. So when you look at the discretionary budget, we do an allocation to each building on a per pupil basis for some of those costs. Those students, or those schools that are highly impacted by poverty, so if the school as a whole exceeds the district's average, so you have to be 43% or higher in free and reduced count, qualifies for what's known as Title I. And we get a federal grant then to put those additional dollars into those specific schools. So right now, Lowell, Franklin, Hawthorne, and Russell qualify in Missoula because they have pockets of poverty that exceed the district's average. Right now, Seeley Swan High School, I didn't mention this earlier, is part of our district. We serve everybody in the high schools in Missoula County with the exception of Frenchtown. So the students that live up Seeley Lake, they're part of our district for high school, not for elementary. Seeley and Hellgate and Big Sky have historically qualified as title schools. Hellgate's losing its title support. Again, the demographic continues to change in the core of the community, so it'll just be Big Sky and Seeley qualifying at the high school level. Right now, Porter Middle School is the only one of the 3 middle schools that qualifies. Yes?
Is part of the disparity that she's seeing in just like the things that are available to students, how much of that is attributed to like parent or like PTAs and fundraising amongst like the parents of students?
Those are all huge issues. So I was principal at Chief Charlo School when it first opened. And we didn't have a computer lab. We had a room, but we didn't have a computer lab. And our PTO went out and raised, I don't remember what it was, $20,000 or $30,000 to completely outfit the computer lab. There are other schools in this community that could never generate that kind of money in their school community. There is disparity that's really challenging for us in that regard. You know, the challenge, though, more so than anything is, you know, if you read Ruby Payne's work on poverty, if you have a classroom, say, of 30 students, and if you've got 5 or 6 kids that are from families that are impacted significantly by poverty, those kids' achievement and such tends to match their peers in the classroom because that's just the dynamic of the classroom. But when you get to a point where you have 80% or so of those kids who haven't had the experience of family vacations, who haven't maybe ever left Missoula County, et cetera, their life experiences are different. They don't have books and reading material in the home. They haven't had maybe access to health care. They don't have access to good nutrition. That hugely impacts the classroom. So the federal money is intended to try and support them and provide additional support, both staff support as well as materials and supplies. But it's a huge challenge to try and level that playing field.
Mark, are there resources for pregnant teens? There used to be a nursery at Sentinel.
Yeah, there used to be. We used to have a pregnant and parenting teens program, and it was housed at Sentinel, and we had a daycare. And over time, the dynamic changed significantly that pregnant and parenting teens didn't want to transfer to Sentinel. So they were dispersed all across the district. So we went through meetings with the health department to look at a different plan to try and keep students in their home buildings, to get them connected with community resources through the health department to manage that in a different way. Yes?
How many speech and language therapist positions do you have?
Boy, you are taxing me today. I would say
approximately
probably about 8 to 10. Most of them serve 2 schools. And again, we have 17 active facilities, and then our early kindergarten and our preschool. I do want to, I know we're about out of time here, I do want to mention early kindergarten. If you've looked at the governor's budget proposal, he again has on there state-funded preschool. 47 states fund preschool. Montana does not. We recognize that there are some students that we serve that come to kindergarten have had experiences of homes where there's lots of reading material or rich opportunities for preschool and high-quality childcare, and others who don't have that. So we as a district decided we wanted to do an early intervention. I'm a firm believer, the earlier we intervene, the better the outcomes are going to be. So we sought some grant funding last year for seed money, and we actually started what we call Early K program, but it's a program for 4-year-olds. We're running 2 classrooms, 40 students presently, to give kids those rich experiences so next year when they actually enter a regular kindergarten class, hopefully the playing field is more level for them. So there are private groups, we're monitoring and assessing the value of the program. We're housing it at Jefferson right now with our special ed preschool. We hope to expand the program next year, even if the governor's budget doesn't pass. We feel it's just critical, again, if we're going to overcome the effects of poverty and such, to intervene as early as possible with those kids. Yeah. Okay.
I have one last question. What do you think is the best way for someone who's interested in volunteering in schools or being a part of, from a community engagement standpoint, to get in and be able to do something like that?
I don't know if she included it here. Haven't reworked my slide deck today. Some more budget stuff. Whoops. They don't have a chance to. I would encourage you to go to our website.
Okay.
We have a ton of stuff on our website, and there's a link there about volunteer opportunities.
Okay, great, thank you.
So kind of to the same point, but what do you think is the best way that a community can engage and support its schools outside of funding?
I think this is critical. I think people who understand what the realities are presently in the community and can help spread that message. If you've got the time and desire to be involved in schools, whether it's through the PTAs, PTOs, booster clubs, or as a volunteer, we're always looking for like reading volunteers. The power of an adult mentoring a student is incredible. So those kinds of opportunities exist throughout the district.
What are your thoughts on teachers taking it upon themselves to raise funds for like a classroom purchase or a trip or something?
Again, we've had a lot of question about that, particularly about crowdsource funding, crowdfunding, and that's a real challenge because of equity. We also have run into that with athletics because of issues over Title IX and gender equity. So we're actually talking about our fiscal policies right now and looking at what we need to do to make sure that we enhance opportunities for all as opposed to isolated pockets.
Do you have a personal opinion?
Okay, right. We right now rely a lot on privately raised funds. So as I referenced earlier, we went out and got a $250,000 grant from the Heeman Foundation to launch our Project Lead the Way in the elementary schools. We are partners with the university in a $1.5 million grant from the Washington Foundation that's supporting things like our IB, our DLI, our assessment programs. Without that additional private funding, we couldn't do a lot of the things we do. And quite honestly, I'm a little concerned that it puts us in a position again with regard to equity across the state because we've had the capacity to do that. And That's because we've got a great supportive community and there are some great foundations here. We went out and got $60,000 to start our 2 early K programs this year. Again, privately funded. I think that's imperative. I appreciate the support of the community, but it does give me pause sometimes when I think about equity of access and such, particularly when we get to a school by school or a classroom by classroom basis.
Regarding her question, as a former tax bull, you should know that any teacher can take a $250 deduction off of gross income. Anything over and above that donated is a donation to the school, which you itemize.
Thank you.
And Mark, I would just add upon your comments, and I think what you're starting to note already, just in this first class, is that interconnection or that interdependence between private sector, academia, and government. They all go hand in hand. Healthcare.
Yes.
I thought something was going on in California. How do you feel about the smaller, just standardized testing aspect of it, standardized testing?
We do a fair amount of assessment. There are 2 different kinds of assessment. One's summative and one's formative. And I would say there's a place for both, although I don't want to spend a ton of time on assessment. The formative is critical. We need to know if the students are mastering the content that we purport to teach. So a good teacher is going to do a variety of different kind of assessments, use that information to inform their practice. What do I need to reteach, teach differently? What have the kids already mastered? I can move on. I think that the summative is important so we can essentially dipstick and say, is Missoula achieving as it should compared to our peers in the state or our peers in the nation? Are we on track? So I think there's a place for both. I just wouldn't want an inordinate amount of time spent on assessment. I want the authentic teaching. And I'm going to mention one other thing that I mentioned during IB, kids getting college credits. We, again, are so fortunate to be in a university community. We have a very robust dual enrollment or dual credit program. We have 600 high school students right now that are earning credits that will be on a University of Montana transcript when they complete. They pay $51 a credit right now. Compared to what you pay when they actually go to the university, it's a huge bargain. And kids will accrue significant numbers of credits. The legislature just passed a new law, and we now have access to the first 6 credits at no charge to those kids. Wow. So that's starting next semester, so January 21st, and we're going to take full advantage of that with our kids. The more kids take advantage of that in high school, the less they're going to pay out, of course, on the college tuition side. And I'll reference my own daughter. Graduated from Sentinel High School, had enough credits that she entered as a sophomore in college, finished her undergraduate education in 3 years. That's a huge savings to me as a parent. And I appreciate her hard work and dedication, but kids need to take advantage of that opportunity in this day and age. We hear a lot about the cost of higher education, and that's one way to work around it.
How does that affect the university?
The university, the university benefits because those kids count toward enrollment based on the number of credits they take. So, yeah, it is helpful. All right, I know we ran right up against the 9 o'clock hour. I appreciate your time and attention. I feel like I talked too much. I hope that you got your questions answered and found it to be beneficial.
Thank you, Mark. Now, just before you go, I want to say the next session, we'll see you in a week, January 22nd. The topic is city government and city engagement, how city government works, guiding principles and vision, and the 3 branches of government. We'll have Mayor Engen, Brian von Lossberg, and other city council members. He's the city council president, and municipal judge Kathleen Jentz. It's going to be held in city council chambers, 140 West Pine, which is next to the Thomas Marr Bar, right down from Sushi Hana. There's an extra one of these in there if you would like to take it with you, if you need. We put 2 in there for you. And before you leave, please drop off your binders outside in the carts, and we'll have them ready next week for you.
And one other thing, Jane mentioned the word Thomas Marr Bar. So next week, when we finish up after chambers, I had this 1:00 a.m. idea, just like this whole academy, which is, if you would like to join us afterwards for some additional questions and to raise a pint, you are welcome to join that crew next week, Tuesday. Okay?
Yay! Thank you all.